don't know who Kristen Faulkner is, you've probably been living under a rock. Kristen has recently made headlines by winning not one, but two Olympic gold medals. In this podcast episode, I'm thrilled to bring you an inspiring conversation with one of the biggest names in women's pro cycling today. In this interview, we dive deep into her story, exploring the incredible mental strength she's developed to thrive at the highest levels of the sport. Kristen opens up about the unique struggles that female cyclists encounter and shares some golden nugget of wisdom for any girl or woman dreaming of a professional cycling career. She's not just a champion because of her athletic prowess. She's someone who's combined her diverse life experiences, unique skills, and sheer passion to create a formula for success that we can all learn from. I know you're going to find her insights just as powerful and motivating as I did. Kristen, thank you so much for being here. It's been about a month since you won not one, but two gold medals at the Olympics, which is so huge, and congratulations. How has your life changed since then?
It's changed in a lot of ways. I mean, the first was just there's a lot of media attention, at the Tour de France, a lot of cameras on me. And I've been doing about 2 hours of podcast every single day since the tour finished. And so it's been quite busy just from a media standpoint and keeping up with it all. And then I think, I'm writing a book about it. I've had some inquiries about, like a documentary or movie. And it's just been really busy. I think people want to hear the story and they want to hear it from me. And so it's been really exciting to be able to share my story, but also really exhausting. And but it's good. I think it's made me realize that that I can really use my voice now to have an impact on, bringing more women, bringing more people to watch women's sports, getting more girls on bikes, and just like really raising the profile of the sport. It's a really exciting position to be in.
Why is that something that's important to you?
I think for me, women's cycling, it's something that's so big in Europe, and cycling in general. Well, there's in Europe, cycling is a really big sport, and in America, it's not. And I think for me, the more people we can bring into cycling, I think the more eyeballs watching women's cycling, the higher the viewership, the higher the sponsors, the higher the salaries for the sport, and so that's really important for me, largely because right now it's a very male-dominated sport. The men's salaries at the top are over 10 times the women. And I think the only way to really bring gender parity to the sport is to raise the profile and get more people viewing the sport. And so if I can get more people interested in cycling, I think we can bridge the gender gap in the sport.
Yeah. Obviously you said you've gotten all this attention, which I think to the public, an Olympic medal is the biggest thing. Is that to you, has this been your biggest cycling accomplishment so far, or is it something else?
It's definitely been my biggest accomplishment. I think, I was 8 years old watching the Olympics and thinking, I want to do that one day. And so, it's a culmination of years and years of really dreaming about it and not sure if I would make it happen. And so to have it happen, it's a bit surreal. And, people ask me the day after the Olympics, have you processed it yet? And I was like, no. And then a week after, have you processed it yet? And I said, no. And now it's a month after, and I still feel like I haven't fully processed everything that's happened. When you work for something for decades or, years and years, and then in the span of minutes or hours, it can totally change your life. I think it takes a really long time to adjust to that.
Yeah, absolutely. There's been a lot of discussion about the mental health of Olympic athletes, and notably Michael Phelps did a documentary, The Weight of Gold. Has that ever been something for you? Have you ever struggled with your mental health?
Yeah, definitely. In fact, I was diagnosed with depression and when I was in high school, and I saw a psychologist and a psychiatrist for quite a long time through my adulthood. And then in 2022 at the World Championship, I actually had to go back and see my psychologist because I was really struggling and I wasn't sure if I was going to race. And I really leaned on my coach a lot, who was down there with me to kind of get me motivated out of the hotel every day and get to training. And it was a tough time because the World Championship's a really big event, and it was my first time doing the time trial there, which I'd worked all year to have that spot. And so when you work all year to have this opportunity and then you get there and your mental health isn't in the right place, it's a really it's really hard because you're dealing with that, but then you're also dealing with but I don't want to give up this opportunity. I don't want to waste this opportunity. And so you almost push yourself even harder to try and, get to the race. And so I think for me, having a psychologist and a mental coach throughout my career who I can, maybe go to when I need them and then take some time off. And I think it's just really important to have someone on call when you need them, have
Yeah.
someone who's always there. And then I think equally important though is having a circle of people who you can just pick up the phone and call any time of day, no matter what. And for me, I really built that over the course of my career. I think in school, I had my friends and I had my parents, and I think as I've gotten older, I've tried to build a circle of people who, care about me just as much, but maybe also have a bit more insight into what I'm going through, who understand, and so it's, I think, important to have people who've known you your whole life, but it's also important to have people who know the industry and who know the struggles you're facing, who can really not just sympathize with you, but empathize with you. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, I've made a big effort throughout my career to really like build that circle around me. And I think it's made the biggest difference to my mental health.
Are there any women that have served for you like as mentors or that you have looked up to within the cycling world?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of mental health or just in general,
Just
or
in general, but it could be either. But I imagine it's kind of a lonely place to be. There aren't a lot of, gold medalists out there in the world. There aren't a lot of women performing at the level you're performing at. Have there been others ahead of you that you've been able to look to for help?
yeah, although to be honest, I don't think like for me, I say the person who's been most impactful was actually my coach at who's my coach for 5 years. He was a guy actually, and
Okay.
I felt that he hadn't won a gold medal before. He wasn't a woman who was experiencing the gender inequality. But he's someone who had raced in Europe for so long. And when I first moved to Europe, he was really impactful because um he was the one who was like, go to the dentist because you're eating sugary foods on the bike every day, and make sure that you call your parents and make sure that you take 3 days off the bike after a big tour, and just gave me a lot of advice that I think was really helpful.
Yeah.
Um, and to be honest, I think it's there's definitely women I look up to in the sport, and I've definitely had mentors. I mean, there's a girl, Nina, who's been on my team for the 5 years I've been pro. Like every single team I've been on, we've been on 3 different teams together. And she was quite experienced when I started. And so for me, she's seen me progress from my earliest days. And I think having someone in the peloton who knows me super well, who can act as a mentor, has been quite helpful for me.
Aside from like the support system you've built, is there anything specific you've done to work on like your mental strength in terms of meditation or mantras or journaling? What does that kind of look like for you?
Yeah, definitely. One book that I really like, it's called The Little Book of Stoicism, and it talks about just the Stoic mindset, which is control what you can control, and don't worry about anything else. Just really put all your energy into controlling what you can control. And I think when I was younger, and even when I started out my career, I think there were things I couldn't control that I would get really stressed about. It's like I'd get really stressed about the rain outside when I wanted to rain, or when I wanted to ride, or I'd get really stressed about um, things on the team, or just the fact that I was far away from home, and those things would stress me out. And I think learning to really just focus on what I can control and have that be the only thing that takes my mental energy really helped me a lot. Because suddenly, there's actually this diagram I saw one time that I really like, and it said, can you fix it, or can you fix the situation? And then it was a decision tree, and it was like, yes. Okay, then don't worry about it because you can
Mm.
fix it. And then it was like, can you change the situation? No. Okay, don't worry about it. And I think it was interesting because it really taught me that I was like stressing out too much. I needed to just really not stress about the things I couldn't control. And then when
Hmm.
there were things I could control, just like go fix it, go do what I needed to do. So that's been really helpful. I do write in a journal. I find that's really helpful for me to relax, and I like having my memories on paper because I can go back, and I think when I retire, I'll want to remember some of these things. And I find that when I put my thoughts on paper, I don't bottle them up so much, and I kind of just, it's a way to like let them out. And then another thing is I am quite introverted, and when I was younger, I actually thought I was extroverted. Um I'm one of 5 children, and we grew up in an incredibly chaotic household. It was a loving household, but it just like all of us did sports. We were running around. There were baseballs flying through the window and basketballs and hot, I had 3 brothers, and yeah, I had friends over, and so I was always surrounded by people. And then in college, I always had roommates. And so I spent most of my life around other people. And I always thought, oh, I'm extroverted. I'm always around people. And it wasn't until I started cycling and actually living on my own where I was like, wow, I really like having alone time. Like this is really important to me. And so between races, I actually spend quite a lot of time alone, and I'm not lonely. I just enjoy being able
Mhm.
to decompress in that way. And I found that when I give myself alone time, my mental health is so much better because I can just decompress, I can relax, and I can really just self-reflect and focus on what I need and fulfilling my needs. And then when I go back to the team, I'm so much more fresh. And so that's been something that's really helped me is just realizing, oh, actually, I'm not what I always thought I was.
Mhm.
I have different needs that I didn't realize before, and I need to cater to those needs.
Yeah. What does an average day look like for you right now?
Oh goodness, there is no average day to be honest. So I'm currently at the US Olympic Training Center. So on Monday, Wednesday, Friday, I have track training. Usually I go to the velodrome at 9 a.m. I'm there for 2 to 3 hours doing kind of high intensity interval type work. I wake up quite early. I wake up at 6. I usually do an hour of work on the computer. I'm actually writing a book right now, so I usually devote that time to kind of putting my ideas out, kind of waking up before, breakfast. And then I go to breakfast for half an hour. I come back, I do maybe some stretching, some light, glute activation, and then go to training, come back, have lunch, go ride the road for 2 hours afterwards, come back, see the physio or massage to do some body work. And then I go to dinner. And then in the evenings, I'll work on my nutrition course because I'm currently getting my master's in
Oh,
nutrition.
wow.
Yeah, it's an online course. I'm really enjoying it. It's just something I started this fall, but I've always had an interest in nutrition, and yeah, the opportunity came through the USOPC to do this online course, and so I decided to pursue it.
I mean, you were like so mind-blowingly impressive. You're not only this Olympic gold medalist, you went to Harvard, you had a successful career in finance. You're now a professional cyclist and working on your master's degree. What do you think it is about you that makes you so successful?
Honestly, I don't want this to sound like a cop-out answer, but I really try to make sure that everything I do is something I really enjoy. So I'm not just getting a master's. And I wouldn't be getting my master's to get a master's. I mean, it took me until I was 31 to decide this was worth it. I'm doing it because I love nutrition and I love learning about nutrition. And so for me, I don't see it as like, oh, I'm getting my master's. I see it as like, oh, I get to learn about this topic I really enjoy, and in a structured environment, and someone's like they're teaching me about this topic I am really curious to learn more about. And then, with finance, like I had lots of job offers after college. I chose venture capital because it actually paid the least of all my offers, but I was the most excited about it. I was
Mm.
interested in working with entrepreneurs. I wanted to support more female entrepreneurs. I wanted to learn about startups, and so I think I've taken a lot of steps in my life that might seem kind of like the wrong decision in the short term, but the right one in the long term. I didn't take the highest job offer after college, but I took a job I really loved. And then
Mhm.
I ended up leaving that job to go make $7,000 a year my first year as a cyclist, moving to Europe. My parents had no idea what I was doing. It was a huge risk. And that seemed like a totally bad decision to most people. But for me, I was just doing what made me happy. And I only became an Olympian years later. It wasn't, and I think that was, people talk about this quick trajectory, but I mean, there were 4 years where I wasn't an Olympian. My
Mm,
parents,
mhm,
like there wasn't a lot of media around me. It
mhm.
was 4 years of like very little validation of what I was doing. And so, um, I think I don't want to sound like a cop out, but like in retrospect, it's like, oh, she's done all these successful things. But before I did any of them, like they weren't obvious
Mm.
decisions. They weren't decisions I made because I wanted to be successful. They're decisions I made because it made me happy. And then once I started in that pursuit, I was like, okay, now I want to be the best I can be. Um, but if I had, you know, at 26 years old decided that being successful was more important than being happy, I never would have become a cyclist and I never would have won these gold medals. And so I think we always feel more motivated and we're always more inspired when we're doing something we really love. And I think it's important to remember that because when we think there's no successful paths in our passion, we can create success there. It just might take a little longer, the path might not be as clear when we start.
I love that. What's next for you? What goals do you still have that you haven't accomplished yet?
Yeah. Well, I have kind of a 2-year plan, a 5-year plan, a 10-year plan. I think, I want to stay cycling until LA. I'd like to go to the LA Olympics. That's something I'm really excited about. It's home Olympics. So that's kind of on the horizon for me. I have the World Championship coming up at the end of September in Zurich. So that's also a big goal of mine. And I think for the next few years, maybe I want to, I have quite a few goals in the bike. I'd like to win a world championship at the time trial at some point in my career. I'd like to win a big stage race, as a GC rider, become a bit more of a GC rider. I'd like to finish my book and publish a book about my Olympic journey. And yeah, maybe at some point before I'm 40, I'd like to start a family, but I don't know when I want to do that, And so there's kind of these short-term and these long-term goals, and it's kind of taking one step at a time.
There have been a lot of changes in women's pro cycling over the last couple of years. Things have kind of like moved rapidly, it seems like. What changes have you seen during that period of time, and what changes would you still like to see take place?
Yeah, the first is TV coverage. When I started cycling in Europe, my parents didn't know anything about cycling, and there was no TV coverage to watch me. So they really had no idea what I was doing, what my life was like, what were these races I was going to, were there even fans at them? What did it mean to let a break go? What did it mean to be in a break? Like, they had no idea.
Yeah.
And so the media coverage for women has just really improved over the last few years. And now pretty much every World Tour race you can watch on TV, and some of the non-World Tour races as well. And so that's been really great for, bringing more fans to the sport, which brings more viewership and media and dollars to the sport. But it's also just been good from a personal level, for my friends and family to be able to see what I do for a life, for my living,
Yeah.
So TV coverage is one. The second is, I think there's been a lot more money going into women's cycling, and we see that with a lot of men's teams adding women's teams, which bring more resources. They bring team buses, they bring physios, they bring doctors to every race, they bring more media exposure, and so the resources and support that women are getting is also much higher. And that also means there's more scrutiny on the teams. And so I think, 5 or 10 years ago, you may have heard some sketchy situations where maybe there was an inappropriate, team manager that was a man, or, there were some sketchy things happening. And now, because it's under the radars, there's these bigger companies involved, I think the sport is actually a very safe place for women now. And I don't think that was always true. And I think you still maybe hear about, uncomfortable situations on really small teams, but I think by and large, it's way better than it was 10 years ago. And then I think women's salaries have definitely gone up. When I started, I was I wasn't making enough to live off of, and now there's minimum wage for all the major teams. They have requirements that they have to give minimum wage to the riders. And then also at the top riders are making way more than they used to. And so I think it's motivating for a lot of women because they see, oh, I can actually make, nowhere near the men, but I can make a lot more money than I would have, 5 years ago even. And so that's really exciting to see. And then just the level, because women don't have to work part-time jobs on the side, they can devote more time to training and recovery. They can go on their 5-hour rides. They can go to the gym. They can go to the physio. And so as a result, the races are getting way harder. It's like the fitness level is higher. Girls are able to take, the full season, because before they maybe couldn't take time off work. And so now they're doing more races. They're getting better at racing. And so, and we're getting, we're able to hire better directors in the races, which helps with team strategy. And then the girls pick up on that strategy. So the whole field is just way stronger. And I think, if you were good 5 years ago and you stayed at the same level, like, you would not be competitive today at all, and everyone, even the people who are at the top, have had to continuously improve to stay at the top. And that's a really great thing for the sport.
Yeah.
So I think those are the main things. What I would like to see get better, I think salaries still, need to go higher. The discrepancy between the top men and women is over 10 times, and I'd like to see women getting paid the same for men for doing the same work and working just as hard and same sacrifices, That's a big one. I think more viewership for women's sports right now, more people watch men's racing. And I think that's because you hear about men's racing, it's promoted online. You hear about the men's characters because for every article about a woman, there's, 100 articles about one of the top men.
Yeah.
And I think people say like, oh, but no one watches women's racing. And it's like, well, no one's going to watch something if they don't know about the players or the camaraderie,
Yeah.
the rivalries. Like we have to invest in it to get people
Mhm.
excited about, the rivalries, the stories, the characters, the courses. And so I'd like to see more investment up front go into women's cycling so that we
Yeah.
can bring the exposure that we need. And then yeah, I think those are the primary things. I mean, prize money from race organizers is still a huge discrepancy. I think for the Tour de France and for a lot of these major races, it's 5 to 10 times prize purse compared to men and women. And so we do the exact same race on the same day, and the men get way more for winning, and that's hurtful and disappointing, especially when the spectators are there for both races.
Yeah. Aside from the pay disparity, is there anything like on a personal level that you feel like has been a challenge as a female cyclist specifically, as maybe as opposed to a male cyclist?
Yeah, I mean, I'll just give an example. Like one time at a race, I had a really bad saddle sore, and it was located right between my legs in a really
Mhm.
private spot.
Mhm.
And we only had male doctors at the race, and I really needed someone to look at it because I was worried, would this get infected? Will it open up? And so, it's just like having a male doctor look at you is a little different from having a woman. And those are just some things. Like there's not we bring doctors over from the men's team, and we don't have our own doctor. I mean, we do now on the team I'm in, EFO Lee Canadell does, but in prior teams we didn't. And so, um, yeah, I think just things like that, or having um just a female director, a female manager. I think it gives me a role model. How do they carry themselves in a room full of men? How do they speak? How do they dress? How do they talk? How do they like when you watch a woman, it's a little different from watching a man. And even if they're both equally good at their jobs and they can both hold their conversation in a room, I pick up on cues from the woman that I might not pick up on the man from the man.
Mhm.
It's like I can be like that one day. That's how I can hold myself. And I think you really need those female role models in life. And
Yeah.
as a women's team in the last few years, I think there's more women working in the industry, more women who are being hired in senior roles. And in the past, there just weren't that many women in senior roles because the industry was dominated by men.
Mhm. Yeah. What advice do you have for young women or girls listening to this who are like, I'd really like to be a professional cyclist too?
I would say get on your bike. If you want to hire a coach and start training, then you can do that. The biggest thing is just spend time on your bike, get and have fun on your bike, go around some corners or race your friend, learn bike handling. I think when I started, I was so focused on my fitness.
Mm.
I was like, I want to be fit. But
Yeah.
actually, when you want to race, the technical aspects are way more important or equally
Mhm.
important,
Yeah.
and so I think for young girls who want to be cyclists, like go work on your skills too,
Yeah.
um, join some group rides with the men to challenge yourselves, and find some really strong women to ride with, because, having a strong group of women who you can go ride with makes a big difference. It makes it more
It
fun. You make
does.
friends. And also there's just this feminine, like there's this energy. When you're in a group of strong women, you feel this feminine energy
Mhm.
that you just don't get when you're around men. And I don't mean to make that like a, gendered thing too much, but like there is something about being in a strong group of people who are like you and
Yeah,
having that group and having that community that I think is really important for all of us.
absolutely. You had kind of a late start to cycling. You didn't start until your 20s, although you were a competitive athlete before that. Do you think that late start has actually been an advantage for you? Or like, for instance, I know a lot of kids who are 12 years old and they're already like very focused on cycling and sometimes they burn out.
Mm.
Do you think that the time frame where you started has been helpful?
Yeah, I mean the truth is I'll never know, right? Like
Okay.
I'll never know what it would have been like if I had started young. And I think the best answer I can give is I have a lot more skills in certain ways that I wouldn't have had otherwise if I'd started young. I was also lacking certain skills that I didn't have. And I think for me, I do see it as an advantage. And in a lot of ways. I mean, the first is I had a career before cycling, and so there's not a single part of me that's worried about my post-cycling career. Like a lot of people are like, oh, when I retire from cycling, what am I going to do? And it causes them anxiety, or maybe they race longer than they want to. And they start hating the sport because they feel like they have to do it. It's their only job. They're like, I don't know what else I could do. And then it becomes like a job to them instead of something they really love. And I think for me, because I had a job before, and a job that I, in theory could go back to, I never feel this pressure like I have to be here. It's like I'm here because I want to be here. And I think that mental side of it makes a big difference. Cycling doesn't, I mean, it does feel like my job, but it doesn't feel like a job I have to do. It feels like a job I'm choosing to do. Every day I feel like I'm choosing it, and that makes a big difference. I also think I learned a lot of things in my professional career that I brought to cycling. And the thorough diligence I did on companies, I bring that to racing. I study the course, I study the riders. Like I'm super thorough in how I assess and analyze and study for things, because I had to be so thorough in my job. And I think that really sped up my learning trajectory. And I learned on the job, like what questions to ask, how to be super curious, how to ask every question you could possibly think of, and when I approach a race, I do the same thing. I check all my boxes, and learning how to do such thorough research and thorough diligence really helped me. I think another thing that I've spoken about before is in venture capital, we invest in highly risky startups. So, maybe we invest in 10 companies and only 2 or 3 are successful. They're, half of them kind of break even, and then some of them, don't work out and you end up losing money. But the ones who win, like you return the entire fund. And so it's this industry that's very polarizing. It's these massive wins and then a lot of losses. And so when I started cycling, like I was very okay with risk. I was very okay failing. Like if the camera was on me and I attacked and I got caught, like I didn't think twice about it. I wasn't like, oh, I failed on TV and everyone saw me. Like I was just like, okay, try the next one. Like it didn't faze me at all. And that attitude, it just allowed me to be a very aggressive rider. Like I would attack and attack and attack again. And I wasn't scared of getting caught back. And ultimately that's my race style. Like that's how I won at the Olympics, was I just go for it. I'm not afraid. And I think that was largely informed from my job, where I knew that if I just did it over and over and over again enough times and strategically, one of them would land and one of them would result in a win,
Yeah.
And so I think I thought of it as like this portfolio of attempts, as opposed to just like, and on any given one, if there's a 20% chance you make it, most people wouldn't do it. But for me, I'm like, okay, if I do it 5 times, I'll make it one of them and then I'll win, So I think the way that I approached it, and the way I approached racing and strategy was just a little bit different from other people. And it allowed me to win in ways that maybe other people wouldn't have been so willing to try.
Yeah.
So
That's super interesting. I love that. Like all of your experience comes to make you who you are, right?
yeah. And I think, I think it's not necessarily like, I mean, starting late, I knew I had a lot to catch up on. So I had this sense of urgency too. But I think, if I'd started late or started early, I think the biggest thing is just that I had a range of experiences that allowed me to learn so many different skill sets that I could then transfer over to cycling. And so when I see kids specializing really, really young,
Yeah.
my fear is like, if they specialize in triathlon, like, well, they learn hand-eye coordination skills that they need, later if they're on the bike doing bike handling, and hand-eye coordination skills to like dodge like a hole in the ground, And so like there's all these things. And for me, I was an endurance athlete my entire life. And yes, I'd done swimming and rowing and things, but my biggest weakness when I started cycling was my bike handling, because I didn't spend a ton of time on soccer and ball sports, And so I think when we do different skills, we actually learn different skills that are highly transferable, even if we don't realize they're transferable at the time.
Yes. What have I not asked you that you would like folks listening to know?
Well, that's a great question. I've had a lot of people ask me, like, were you scared when you left your job? Were you scared about taking the jump? And my answer is like, absolutely. Like, I don't want people to think that I just like left my job and won 2 gold medals. Like there was so much behind the scenes. Like there was years of, getting flat tires in the rain and having to call an Uber and being late for my meeting, and, like missing holidays with my family and traveling, like there were so many things that made it so hard that I don't think the media talks about. And you know, I always say like 99% of it is the work and the 1% is you on stage winning a race or winning a medal. And like that's people see the 1%, but they don't see the 99% behind the scenes.
Mm.
And so if you're working on something and you're like, I keep failing, I'm struggling, I feel like I'm falling, all that, like that's normal. And that's a normal part of the process. It's normal to feel like you're failing sometimes. It's normal to feel scared. It's normal to feel a bit overwhelmed or to feel like you're in over your head. I mean, you don't want to have that every day, but when you're pursuing something really ambitious, or even when you're pursuing something that's risky, like you're going to have a lot of moments of uncertainty where it doesn't seem like it's working out. And I think if you just really keep your focus on the big goal and control what you can control and just have a little patience, I think it'll all work out in the end. But just like don't forget that that's all part of the process and to just be patient in the long run.
I have 3 final questions for you, but first, do you have any sponsors you want to give a shout out to, and where can people come follow along with you?
Yeah, so the 3 main sponsors of our team are EF Education, Oatly, which is the oat milk company, and Cannondale, which is a bike company. And they have supported our team, not just them, you know, they've made a big effort to really have a good women's team. And when you buy from those brands, you're also supporting women's cycling. So I just want to give a shout out to them. And your other question?
Oh, where can
was-
people come follow
Oh.
you?
Yeah, I post mostly on Instagram. My handle is Arctic Fox, ARCTICFAULKS. And then I also have a Strava account where you can follow my rides. So those are probably the two social media platforms that I'm like the only 2 that I'm really active on.
3 final questions. The first one is, what bike or bikes do you ride?
I ride a Cannondale and it's a road bike. I also have their mountain bike and their gravel bike. So I'm all in on Cannondale.
Second question is, where is your favorite place you've ever ridden your bike?
Ooh, I would say in Menlo Park. Well, in Marin on Highway 1, it's just absolutely stunning. Over to Stinson Beach on the waterfront over there. Or one of the rides near Menlo Park where I rode my bike for years while I was training and got to know those climbs really well.
The final question is, what is your favorite thing about riding your bike?
I love when the sun's on my face and the wind's on my face, and I just feel like there's no one around me. It's just me and nature. I think it's an amazing feeling, and that's when I feel so free and creative, and it's just me and my bike and the open air, and that's an amazing feeling.